So with that, here we go. Bruce Tuckman was the organizational researcher who recognized these 4 stages of organizational change. It's on the right hand of your screen in the blue box, okay? So he was an educational researcher, and early in his tenure, he spent time with the U.S. Navy, and he did he observed groups, he read a lot of information about groups, et cetera, and he saw some common things happen when groups experience change, right? When groups, and you can see this as it's a business, it's a town, it's a baseball team. It doesn't matter how big, it doesn't matter how small. It's profit, nonprofit. It doesn't matter what kind of group it is, but these are universal stages that groups go through during times of change. And so I want to go through these one at a time with you and explain what happens during organizational change. And again, if you want to interrupt me, please feel free to do so, and I'll be happy to answer your questions. So, first stage is called form, and that is the time when something happens, something is announced. In an organization, it can be a time of change when you get a new boss, or you lose a person, or like we're just experiencing, we have a pandemic that forced us into this crazy time when we have to be socially distant, and businesses had to close that were deemed unessential, right? Or maybe not close, but you couldn't have contact with customers, and that's really difficult. So what happens in the form stage is that there's often a period of time where people are shocked and in disbelief and don't really believe it and can't really imagine that that's really happened, or they're just stunned, and kind of lots of people just kind of sit back and look at the situation sort of unknowing and not knowing what to do. This stage is sometimes the form stage, kind of like, it can be the kind of polite stage where nobody's really saying anything. Everybody's just kind of watching the leader to see what messages are coming out about the situation. So if you'll recall, in the very early stages of the pandemic, we didn't know if it was actually a pandemic or not, or is it a pandemic, and then how serious is it, and then, oh my gosh, it's really serious. And so the form stage is characterized by a lot of questions that are difficult to answer, so it's very chaotic. Now, pretty quickly, what happens during change is that we go into a storm phase. Storm is actually characterized by conflict. And it's characterized by conflict because some people just don't believe the messages that they're hearing. Some people are in total disbelief and in shock, and so they lose productivity. All of these stages of change really have an impact on productivity. During form, it drops. During storm, it drops really far because people just are either deep in confusion, deep in disbelief, or really mad. Now, as leaders, we have an option here, which is to look at the situation and decide that we're going to try to figure out a new way to do what we used to do. So again, when you heard Barbara talk about how now people can't come to the store, so they're going to the people. Jake has locked his front doors, but he's there as command central, and he's trying to figure out how to keep people that work for him productive during this period of storm. And it means that you can't do it the old way, right? You have to do it some kind of new and different way. And that is why there's conflict, because there's nothing that we can grab onto that says this is how it should be done, because it's never been done that way before. We have to come up with a new normal, which is the third stage of change, which is once you've gone through some of this conflict and the disbelief and the terrifying reality that comes up during the storm, then it is the new normal. So let me give you an example of that right from this current pandemic. I travel all the time for work, typically. And one of the silver linings of the new normal is that when we start flying again, at least temporarily, if not longer, the airlines are not going to put people in the middle seat. And as a road warrior, let me tell you, that is like the best new normal I could imagine and they're doing that so that there can be some social distancing. And the flights are not full anyway. So the fact that that may be a new normal is actually kind of a cool thing. Now, when we get back to another new normal, maybe eventually, and we have a vaccine, maybe they'll start putting people in the middle seats again. But it's going to mean a change in the airline industry as people get used to having that new normal. It's going to be a customer issue that the airlines are going to have to noodle through. Let me give you one more example. Again, this is a travel example that everybody has experienced after 9/11. That one day changed the travel industry forever, because now we all go through the TSA line to get on an airplane. We take off our shoes, we take off our belt, we do all that stuff, we put it in the plastic tin or the plastic container, and we go through the big machine. That didn't happen. I remember going to the airport where everybody went to the gate, and then the person that was traveling got on the plane, and then everybody else left. That is an example of a new normal. And now we can't imagine it any other way, right? So new normal, again, another example, Uber as opposed to taxis. So there's many, many, many examples of how we go from storm and conflict into figuring out what our new normal is. Now, the last stage that he identified was called perform. And that's really that example of, if you take the TSA example, we're just used to it now. We perform well in those circumstances. We know how to manage. Everybody knows you got to put your toiletries in a clear baggie to go through TSA. But think about this. Think about how long it took most of, the vast majority of people to get through norm. Here's the new norm, to get to that level where most, 99% of people that travel know what they have to do in order to go through that TSA checkpoint. So that's overview of how those change stages work. So I'm going to go over and talk to you about individual responses to change. But before I do that, can I answer any questions real quick about form, storm, norm, and perform? Okay. Anytime you want to interrupt, just interrupt. Okay. But now I'm going to go over here and look at this individual responses to change, because this explains, these things over here explain why we go through what we go through in, particularly in storm. All right. So what we know about change, thanks to Tuckman, is that individuals, we all have our kind of preferred response to change, okay? And here they are. First of all, and you all know them, they're the people that criticize whatever the change is. They criticize the leaders or other people on the team, and they just like being the critic, right? They don't want to have to come up with any solutions. They just say, now that's stupid. Now, you know, you guys don't know how to manage your way out of a paper bag. Critics are really actually pretty smart people usually, but they just haven't taken the discipline to understand that if you're going to help your organization move through change, if you want to criticize it, you know, that's fair game, but you really need to come to the criticism with some alternative to offer, right? So we've all got critics in our lives, and all of us at some point or other have reacted as a critic. I'm guilty. You know, it's just true, that we tend to like to look at things and criticize them. Now, there are others among us that really actually never would speak an unkind word, and typically we call those bystanders. And if you look at the pandemic, right, there's plenty of people that are sitting at home in their jammies and their bunny slippers and watching, you know, Netflix. They're just hoping that it goes away soon and we can get back to normal. And they're just trying to dodge any bullet. They don't want to think about it. They don't want to, you know, have anything to do with it. And bystanders are, you know, it's fine. But from a productivity standpoint, if we look at bystanders in an organization or in a town, right, they're content to let other people do the work of the change, and they just sit back and go with the flow, right? Which is maybe easier than dealing with a critic, but at the same time, they may have great ideas that we're losing out on. All right, third typical kind of response style to change is called victim. And victims have the tendency to make the change or the difficult or the conflict personal, right? So the pandemic isn't about protecting everybody and making sure that the medical workers are, you know, that we're putting less load on the hospital system and all that. It's all about, do I have what I need, and I'm upset and I'm unhappy about this situation. So victims can draw the energy down in organizations because instead of thinking globally, they're thinking personally. And again, you know, all of us have had our time, our moment in the victim bucket, myself included. And really what I'm saying to you is that for all of us, and then as bosses and leaders, the example that we set for the people that work for us is to try to switch into that last characteristic that's called navigator. So, what does a navigator do during times of change? A navigator is a person that looks at the situation, understands that this change is nothing that we would have asked for. We don't like it, but we better roll up our sleeves and figure something out. And our navigators are the people who immediately, I mean, it's almost immediate. The first thing they do is go, okay, I got to take some action and I got to figure something out. What am I going to do? What am I going to do differently? And what are my gaps? What I have to fix? And what are my strengths? What do I need to rely on? Right? So here's the good news. Everybody has a navigator inside them. Some of us, it's more prominent. Others of us have to tamp down the critic, and we have to tamp down the bystander, and we have to turn off Netflix, and we have to tamp down the victim in us to become navigators. Now, I want to tell you a quick story, and then we'll go into looking at some tactics. And again, interrupt me at any time if you got a question, okay? So I was teaching a class for, I did a lot of work in the automotive industry. So I had a class of managers who ran Porsche dealerships and a service manager. So, you know, when you take your car to the dealership, there's a service advisor who takes your car and writes it up. And there's a boss who's the service manager. And he listened to this same story that I'm telling you about, change and the individual responses to change. And he decided that what he was going to do is go back home, and he was going to, when he did his performance reviews, he was going to come up with a plan to get people to go from wherever they were at, critic, bystander, victim, into being a navigator. And that was the plan for the year. In their performance review, it was to become a navigator. So, you know, what does that look like? It means critics are still allowed to criticize, but they have to come with a solution too, right? And bystanders, when they don't want to say anything, and he says, yeah, but give me your idea, they have to give him an idea. And victims have either got to get with the program or get their resume out and go someplace else where they can be in a pity party all by themselves, right? They got to figure out a way to think globally, not personally, about what was happening. And so the wonderful thing is about the work that I did is I would get to see people again. And I actually saw this manager again and asked him how it was going. And he was so excited because he said, look, I have converted everybody in my department to being a navigator except for one. I got one victim that won't go, and he's on his way out. He's looking for another job. Simple as that, right? So this is the power of understanding this model, is that as managers and leaders, we can use it as a tool to help us navigate this change, right? So let's go back to the PowerPoint presentation and go to the next slide, because what I want to talk to you about next is some tactics. You know, it's great to have a model, but really what we need are tactics in each one of these categories. And by the way, don't feel like you have to write any of this stuff down, because I'm sure that we can get it to you, or you may have already have it. But and I'm going to tell you something. These are just sample tactics. We could be here all day long and come up with many, many, many more things in each one of these categories, right? But let's start with form. And again, I'm going to encourage you, if you got any questions, raise your hand, stop me, and we can talk about it. So if we look at forms, some tactics these are leadership tactics, guys. So number one, how will I announce this change? How do I tell the people that work for me this hard news? How do I remain optimistic in the face of the fact that people are losing money? They're, worried about feeding their families, all of those kinds of things. But as a navigator, one of the things that we do is look at, how am I going to talk about this? And so, for example, one of the things is to know what resources are available in your community for people that are going to be in need, right? And it's the great thing. I'm so happy that the chamber is here, and that we have this organization, because now you guys can network with each other and help figure out what's available for the people in your organization. Barb and the United Way, that kind of thing. Okay. Second thing in as a tactic, to think about the resistance. Who is going to be resistant to what you're going to say? Because you're going to have critics who are going to be mad and angry. And the best thing that you can do in this form stage is to know who's going to be mad and angry and have a conversation with them and let them talk about it. And try to hold them accountable for coming up with ideas for things that we can do that's going to help us navigate through this change, right? Other things, when is this happening? Now, it's a moving target, right? First we had 2 weeks, then we have another 2 weeks, we may have another 2 weeks, right? So the further we get into the consequences of this current situation, the harder it's going to be for people to comprehend it, understand it, survive it. And so in this form stage, we just have to be brutally honest with people so that we're helping prepare them for what's bad. And I don't know about you guys, but I've been watching Governor Cuomo from New York in those first few messages that he had on TV. He was, he painted a very bleak picture of what was going to happen there. And it is a bleak picture of what happened there, but it's less bleak because in this stage, in this form stage, he didn't gloss over anything. He told people exactly what was going to be happening to the best of his ability, right? You don't always know, but you really have to be informed, get as much information as possible, and be brutally honest. And understand how people respond to change. And again, you notice that with him. He came up with this whole idea, New York Tough. And in New York Tough, it was not only, we're strong, but it was we're loving, right? We're take care of people. That's what New York Strong means. That's, I'm quoting him now. That's because he knew and knows that different people respond to different ways to change. Some people are going to need that real direct message in terms of because their critic mind and heart is at work. Others are going to be motivated through the compassion and so that's why he coined that New York Tough, is not only we're strong, but we're loving. All right. And then what's the mission? Now, what's the mission? What's the reason for this change? And I think, you guys, this is a really important point for right now, is that you might look at this question, and Jake, I know mission is very important to you. You spent a lot of your life in mission, carrying out missions. But our mission, you might think our mission is just to survive this and to stay open, not lose small businesses in this time of change. And I would agree with you. And I would ask this question of you. Is this an opportunity for heart, for small towns in general, right? To reimagine who we are. I'm a small town lover. I grew up on a farm in mid-Michigan. I, went to my little small town my whole life. And, it was when there was a pharmacy and there was a, five and dime, and there was the barber, and there was I worked in the little restaurant in town. I love small towns. And it's been sad to see how, quote, big box stores have decimated our small town living. And maybe this is a moment in time when we can take it back. Think about it. It may be that because we're going through what we're going through, people are going to want to have a small town experience, and they're going to want to have a more individual retail experience, and they're not going to want to have to congregate in Sam's Club anymore. Maybe there's something to seize on there now. Now, I don't know, because I'm no economist or any of that kind of thing, but what I do know is that one of the things that's the most important in the form stage as a leader is to have a sense of curiosity. I think curiosity is a leadership characteristic, right? We should all have curiosity and ask ourselves the questions: is this our time? Is this a time when we can make a difference? Okay, so let's go back to the slide. Let's go to the, I just looked at the time. I need to get you through STORM, NORM, and Perform 2 tactics, all right? I'm passionate about this stuff if you haven't noticed. So anyway, STORM. During times of storm, the leadership, you guys, it's the most critical things that you have to do. So number one on this list is, who are the navigators in your community? Who are the navigators that work for you? Who are the navigators out there that you can tap into to help support the change that you need to make? So if you're a retailer and you haven't done a lot yet with online retailing, you need to find some online retailing navigators to help you know how to approach this, because I think all small town retailers are going to need to be not only have a front facing, but they're going to have an internet face as well, and make it easy to buy and deliver, like Barb was describing. Okay. Number two, what critics do you have to get on board? Get them on board, talk to them, and believe me, you can't have one conversation with a critic. It's the truth. Sometimes it takes multiple conversations to get them to come around, but it's worth it, because if you can convert a critic into being a navigator, you got a friend for life. Right? They're going to work doubly hard, because critics like to get things done. All right. And another thing is to identify the problems that need to be solved and addressed. Right? You have a set of problems, and your neighbors have sets of problems. And as a town, you may want to sort of try to prioritize a set of problems. And actually, I talked with Nicole earlier this morning about a strategic planning process to think about how to prioritize problems that need to be addressed or solved. Okay, so what are the hurdles? If I don't have a web page, that's a hurdle, but I got to have a web page to get to new normal, so I'm going to figure that out, right? What resources do you have? And one of the things that I might recommend as you go forward in your meetings is that you may want to have a session where you have each of you identify, hey, I can do this and I need that. It's called I can do and I need. And everybody identifies what they can do and what they need. And then look at what innovation is. What innovation is possible, right? Is it our time? Is it Newtown? Is it Little Town time? It might be. All right. So if we look at norm is, remember, the phase where we go from all of this change that's happening. So in the pandemic, right, it's what we're going through right now. We're deep into storm. And so the next phase is, if we can do some of these tactics, then we need to think about, okay, now that we've done some of this work, we need to tell people about it. What is the message? What is the mission? What do we need to tell the world that we're doing, that we have done, and that we are about to do? Right? So that's where, you know, Chamber and other folks come in, because we need to market ourselves in a way that we've never marketed ourselves before. Okay. One thing for sure is, I think that we need to have some cross-marketing efforts, where if I buy something from retailer A, retailer B gives me a discount, and same, you know, help each other, get people into town or online by rewarding them to purchase something else. Or have a punch ticket. If you get, you know, you buy from 5 retailers within 6 months, the Chamber gives you your heart beer cozy. I don't know, something, but it's to drive people into that retail spirit. And guys, I've been talking about a lot about retailing, because most of you, it seemed like we're there or support there, but this is also true for large business, right? This is true if you are in manufacturing. Anything you can do to help your town be bigger. And again, if more and more people want to come and live in a small town environment now, maybe this is the time for the manufacturing base to look at ways to make living in the community affordable, so that they can, I understand one of the hardest parts about manufacturing here is getting the workforce. So maybe this, again, maybe we have an opportunity here to work hand in glove, manufacturing and town. Back to the slide. Just a couple other points about, I'm trying to keep track of my time. Yep. So one other thing in the norm phase is that strategies or tactics that help us address the fear and uncertainty and confusion and conflict that are bound to continue to be there, right? We have to, as Jake will tell you, in the military, the mission has to be repeated. The message of what we're trying to do has to be repeated often, because that's what helps address fear, uncertainty, and confusion and conflict. And those are the things that happen when people kind of revert back to that critic, bystander, and victim mode, right? So all of these strategies that you put into place here are what keep people veering toward being navigators of change. Now, at some point, right, we will have identified, we'll have created this new normal. It may never, ever be exactly the way it used to be, right? So in this perform stage, what this means is, just like with TSA, and we all know to take off our shoes and our belts, what are we going to do to recognize and support the new normal, so that we are performing maybe even better than we did before the pandemic? Okay, I know it's hard to believe, and when people right now are in the storm phase and they're just trying to hold on for dear life. But when we do this work and we figure out new ways to be creative and innovative, then that perform stage means that we're reinforcing it. We're celebrating it, right? When the time comes when we can gather together again, what better reason to have a celebration of the people, the businesses, the entities that survived and thrived, right? Would be to celebrate that in some new and novel and creative ways. So I think that that's probably more than enough talk from me right now. And I know we've got a couple minutes left maybe. Do you want to have a little conversation, and maybe we can go back to the gallery view so we can see each other?
Okay, I have a question, Mary.
Okay.
How, if you're a leader, how do you address the misinformation from social media? How do you say, this is what's real, this is what's not? How do you discern that for yourself and for your customers or clients?
It's a great question. I wish I had a magic wand and could give you the answer to that. But I do know, I mean, I know a couple things. One is that, and you and I agreed on this, I'm not passing along anything anymore on social media unless I've checked it. If I see something that comes along, I go check it on Snopes, or, you know, there's a couple of different places that you can do that. And I think as leaders, we have a responsibility to do that, to just at least check the source of information, because yes, it's out there. And retailers in particularly, have you been impacted by that? I mean, are people like misinformed to the point where they don't know how to find you or a way to find you? I don't know. Or Nicole, I don't know. Has that been a difficult thing for people to deal with?
You know, I haven't heard that feedback.
Okay.
Can you guys hear me? Yeah, I haven't heard that feedback. I think we're all experiencing confusion with that, but it hasn't been a source of, I don't know how it's affected the businesses. I think it's a great question, actually.
Well, and one thing I do know is that, you know, in that sense of curiosity as a leadership tactic, I think one way leaders to address it when people come and, you know, their hair's on fire and they're like, oh, this thing's going to happen or that thing's going to happen. And I learned this as, you know, as a boss, is I try to remember my first rule of curiosity is, I wonder where that's coming from, you know, and to ask people, you know, where did you hear that? And how did you hear that? And does that really ring true to you? And I you know, asking questions as a leader is a really great tactic. You know, I don't think it's a solution to that necessarily, but at least it's a way to pull down the anxiety.
Mary, I want to share, you know, my other role, what's happening in Oceana County, because I love what you said about this caring community, this small community. These people here, whether they're leaders or store owners or farmers, they have learned how to work together. And the most important thing in working together is staying informed, which is, you know, why I'm so happy that Nikki, you know, put this together. We did the same thing. First thing that when I saw all of this happening was United Way started as a way to unite people, and you have to stay in communication. And if you stay in communication with the leaders, the superintendents of schools, the law enforcement, the city managers, the health department, the hospitals, the nonprofits, you start seeing trends come up. And you start seeing that oh, golly, I can see now where the big issue is. Right now, the food pantries are swamped with people who are needing food. You've got to start with those basic needs. I understand the basic needs of the shop owners. I'm one of them. But that was something that I was able to do with the small staff that I have, is to just do some brainstorming. So when we found out that the food pantries were overrun, we quickly tapped into that resource. We found out what everybody was needing, and we decided we've got to get mobile food pantries on the road. And so the two big groups that have collected money are the Community Foundation and United Way. So now we partnered. We figured out how to put that portion of our dollars, get those trucks out on the road. And now we're doing the 11th truck this week. So yeah, so this, and the other thing I want to share is that, like you said, that everybody is in each little, there's a part of me that is the panicker, and part of me that's the worrier. And I think you've got to go through all these stages to get to, okay, here's what we're going to do. But
Yeah.
I feel comfortable when I'm on that call of now 50 some people that we all have a little bit of the truth, and we all have a little bit of the answer. So I'm not by myself anymore. And I think that's where you have to get to that action stage. You're not in it by yourself. And there are people who will listen to you, but we're going to get a little tired of listening when it's always the negs. So, but Oceana County, from where I sit, this is the most positive group of people I've ever seen. So the leaders are alive and well in this county, and we're going to be okay.
Oh, thank you, Barb. That we're going to be okay is a really strong message too. What in it as leaders and in the town, you guys, in heart, and when you guys meet again, it's like, you know, that's the fundamental. We're going to be okay. Let's do these things, right? It's the action and the faith and humanity that you have, you know, seen demonstrated, Barb. That's really led you to that. We're going to be okay. It's not just a platitude. It's like, we're doing these things.
Mm-hmm.
And that means we have evidence that we are going to be okay. So I don't want to, where it's almost 11 o'clock and I know that you have an hour, but I mean, I'm curious if you have, for the town of Hart, you know, ideas about things that need to be done and could be done to help support your retail community.
I can just jump in and share that we're trying to come up with a gift certificate program, or make the community aware of those that are offering gift certificates to help kind of keep that cash flow going now. I love your idea about the punch cards and businesses helping businesses. I have to admit, maybe we've been stuck in this panic storm, you know, fear stage, and it's time to move on to what's next and really get together on how. So I love this. It's very encouraging. I'm anxious to hear from the businesses if it has this inspired thought on how to be a better you moving forward. I think this is such great timing, Mary, and thank you. This is wonderful. Any feedback from the businesses on ideas? We're also working on a directory that we want to publish digitally and try to hand out at the few places that are open, so people know what businesses are functioning in what way, what products they can get, how, the hours, that type of thing. So share the word, that get your information to us, and we'll try to publish that.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you for the opportunity. I was thrilled to get to do this, actually. And I have a lot of, I love Hart, and I want you guys to succeed, and I'm sure you will. And thank you, Jake, again for, you know, making the introduction, and Nikki for, you know, setting this up, and all of you wonderful folks for joining in. And please, you know, get in touch with me if you'd like to, you know, have further conversation. I'm more than happy to.
This was very valuable, Mary. Thank you for sharing it. I hope that this is also sent out to the students and you know, young entrepreneurs. And I mean, I've seen this this type of presentation, but I think that if what you did that was really great, you applied it to some actual things that have happened in our world in our lifetime, including the you know, the airline issues and all. So it really, you really did a great job in bringing it down to where we can understand it. And I think that was the part that was missing for me before. You have to find a way to land it at
Yeah.
home.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you for
It comes from all those years of working with guys that work in dealerships. Like, you got to make stuff real, you know?
right. Oh, it's great. And your empathy comes through. I love that.
Thank you, Mary.
Yes. It's really wonderful to meet you all. Hopefully, you know, this is only the beginning, right?
You bet.
Mary, thank you so much. This is truly a gift. I mean, the 30 years of experience in this topic is just, thank you. Thank you for your time. And she gave this to us as a gift. So we're very thankful.
Thank you, Mary.
Yep. Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you, Nikki. Bye, everyone.
You're welcome. And I'll just add to Barb mentioned sharing this session has been recorded, and I'll get it up on social media and our website. So if you know someone who would benefit from hearing this, we'll post it.
That's great. I'll share it on my circle of influence now tomorrow.
Great.
Thanks again.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
I know.
Bye-bye.